This is the tale of the Ottoman Empire, a world of silk and shadow, of domes and devotion, of swords, scholars, and centuries of rule. Over 600 years, it rose from the highlands of Anatolia and carved its place upon the world stage, forging a civilization that still echoes in our cities, languages, cuisines, and laws. But this journey isn't rushed. We'll move slowly, like the current of the Bosphorus under moonlight. With each chapter, you'll gently sail through time from the nomadic roots of a small tribe in the 13th century to the twilight of the empire after World War I. Our tone is quiet, scholarly, and filled with wonder. Imagine yourself in an ancient library, surrounded by books bound in leather and gold, as a kindly professor reads to you, not to test you, but to soothe you with stories of the past. Let us begin by setting the stage. It is the late 13th century. Europe is emerging from feudal darkness. The Mongols have swept across Asia like a firestorm, and the Byzantine Empire, once mighty, is fractured, clinging to its final days. In the fractured lands of Anatolia, small Turkic principalities, known as beyliks, jostle for power. One of these is led by a man named Osman, or as he would be remembered, Osman Ghazi. His people are frontier warriors, Ghazis, bound by the code of battle and belief. They ride through the hills of northwestern Anatolia, herding flocks and defending their borders. It is from this humble beginning of tents, horses, and oral poetry that the Ottomans emerge. What began as a tribal confederation would transform into one of the most enduring empires in world history, bridging continents and civilizations. Their legacy would include breathtaking architecture, flourishing trade, rich legal systems, vibrant art, and one of the most multicultural societies of the pre-modern world. We will meet sultans like Mehmed the Conqueror, who brought an end to the Roman Empire by taking Constantinople, and Suleiman the Magnificent, whose golden age brought law, art, and conquest together in perfect symmetry. We'll travel through quiet courtyards of mosques and palaces, feel the rhythm of daily life in Ottoman markets, hear the calls to prayer echoing across cities, and explore the intellectual and artistic heights that flourished under imperial rule. We'll also move through darker corridors, palace intrigue, Janissary revolts, slow decline, and ultimately, the collapse of the empire amid the fires of modern warfare and nationalism. Yet even in its final days, the Ottoman Empire remained a world of fascination, a tapestry of peoples, languages, and beliefs woven together across centuries. As we drift through the ages, you'll find moments of reflection passages designed to ease your mind further into rest. These pauses in the narrative allow the story to seep in like soft rain on old stone. And if you fall asleep along the way, that's perfectly fine. This story will be waiting for you, like an old friend, whenever you return. This is not simply a tale of battles and borders. It is a journey through culture, memory and time, through hammams and harems, bazaars and battlegrounds, poetry and prayer. It is the quiet conquest of the world, not just by armies, but by ideas, by administration, by artistry. So settle in. Let your body rest. Let your mind wander gently to the distant shores of the Ottoman world. Imagine the soft clatter of a caravan entering a walled city at dusk, the scent of spices and lamp oil in the air, the distant call of a muezzin. Imagine the flickering of candlelight on tiled walls, the hush of scholars in ancient madrises, the silk robes of diplomats moving through palace halls. This is the Ottoman Empire. And your journey begins now. We begin our journey in the windswept highlands of Central Asia, where nomadic Turkic tribes roam the great steppes. Their lives are bound to the rhythm of nature, the grazing of herds, the migrations of seasons, the endless movement beneath wide skies. Among them are the ancestors of the Ottomans, part of the Oghuz Turkic people's horse-riding warriors shaped by the harsh beauty of the land. By the 11th century, many of these tribes begin a slow westward migration, driven by a combination of climate, warfare, and opportunity. As we drift westward with them, we find ourselves in the great Islamic world of the Seljuks, a powerful Turkic dynasty that conquers much of Persia and Anatolia, bringing with it not only military strength, but also culture, art, and Islamic learning. It is within the shadow of the Seljuk Empire that the early Ottomans are born. But, by the late 13th century, the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum, once dominant in Anatolia, has fragmented under the pressure of Mongol invasions. Anatolia becomes a quilt of small, semi-independent Turkic principalities known as beyliks. These frontier regions, or Yus, are turbulent and fertile ground for ambitious leaders. Among these is a small, relatively obscure group led by a man named Ertuğrul. A tribal chieftain, or Bey Ertuğrul, is often depicted in later Ottoman legend as a noble warrior, loyal to the Seljuks, and protector of Muslim lands. He is believed to have settled with his tribe in the region near Soğut, in northwestern Anatolia, close to the faltering Byzantine frontier. His son, Osman, is the founder from whom the empire takes its name. Osman, or Osman Gazi, as he is respectfully known, is a figure wrapped in both history and legend. Born sometime around 1258, he rises as a local leader during a time when the borders between Christian Byzantines and Muslim Turks are porous and unstable. Raiding, alliances, and military skirmishes are common, but Osman stands out. According to one early Ottoman chronicle, Osman has a dream, a vision of a great tree growing from his chest, spreading across the land, symbolizing the vast empire that will emerge from his line. Whether this dream happened or not, it captures the essence of what follows. As we gently trace Osman's footsteps, we see a man of both ambition and strategy. He gathers warriors Ghazis, or frontier fighters for the faith, and begins carving out territory from the Byzantines. His conquests are modest at first, small forts, villages, outposts, but they are symbolic. The Byzantine Empire, once mighty, is weak and fragmented. Local governors are often isolated, supplies are thin, and loyalty to Constantinople is fragile. Osman exploits this vacuum. He also builds alliances with neighboring Muslim beyliks, and sometimes even with Christian lords. His rule is not based solely on force, but also on pragmatic leadership. He allows local Christian populations to keep their customs and land in exchange for taxes and loyalty. This flexibility will become a hallmark of Ottoman administration. Let us pause briefly and walk through a typical village in Osman's time. The landscape is hilly and green in springtime, with scattered herds of sheep and cattle. Simple wooden homes cluster near a small mosque. The air is scented with smoke and fresh bread. People speak a mix of Turkish, Greek, and Armenian. Life is hard, but community ties are strong. The Ottoman state, still just a small principality, is not yet an empire, but a network of tribal warriors and newly settled peasants. By the 1390s, Osman's growing power begins to alarm neighboring rulers. In 1302, he defeats a Byzantine force at the Battle of Baphius, a victory that marks the Ottomans' first significant step onto the historical stage. It's more than a military win. It is a psychological shift. A once minor beylik has shown it can stand up to an imperial army. As Osman consolidates his territory, he lays the foundation for something larger than his lifetime. His leadership structure begins to show early signs of imperial organization: the appointment of trusted commanders, the collection of taxes, the building of roads and fortresses. Osman also uses Vakıf Islamic charitable endowments to fund religious buildings, schools, and public services. This concept will become essential to Ottoman civic life. As we drift toward the end of Osman's life, around 1324 or 1326, we see an aging leader who has transformed a tribal community into an expanding principality. His son Orhan will inherit not only the throne, but also the dream. Under Orhan, the Ottomans will capture the important city of Bursa in 1326, turning it into their first true capital. Though Osman may not have lived to see it, Bursa's fall is often regarded as the symbolic beginning of the empire. Bursa is a city of silk and stone, gardens and fountains. Nestled among green hills, it becomes a center for learning, commerce, and administration. Ottoman architecture begins to bloom here: domed mosques with slender minarets, tiled tombs for the early sultans, covered bazaars humming with life. This marks a new phase, from nomadic warriors to settled rulers. Let us now reflect. The Ottomans have no ancient claim to glory, no mythic lineage like Rome or Persia. Their greatness is born from circumstance, resilience, and the ability to adapt. They are frontier people shaped by hardship, molded by war, and inspired by faith. Yet already, their rule shows hints of the complexity and depth that will define them for centuries. As you breathe softly now, imagine standing atop a hill outside Sout, looking down at the low stone buildings of Osman's world. The air is cool. The wind stirs your cloak. Behind you are the steppes of the east. Ahead, the great cities of Europe and Asia. The road is long, but the foundation has been laid. Osman's world is one of transformation, a liminal place between tradition and ambition, faith and pragmatism, tribe and state. As we leave this first chapter behind, we carry with us the image of a man who dared to dream beyond his borders, whose quiet conquests would one day echo across 3 continents. Now, gently, let your thoughts drift like caravan dust on an Anatolian plain, and prepare to enter a world of expansion. We begin in the newly captured city of Bursa, nestled in the gentle folds of northwestern Anatolia. The year is 1326, and the Ottoman dream is beginning to take form. The streets of Bursa echo with the sounds of market traders, the call to prayer, and the steady rhythms of stonecutters and masons building mosques, baths, and schools. The Ottomans have moved beyond tribal encampments. They are now city builders. Orhan, son of Osman, is now at the helm. Tall, thoughtful, and politically astute, Orhan understands that the key to longevity is not just conquest, but administration. He introduces one of the Ottomans' first currencies, stamped silver coins bearing his name. He also begins to formalize a standing military structure, setting the stage for one of the most important institutions in Ottoman history, the Janissaries. The Janissaries, known in Turkish as Yeniçeri, or new soldiers, will come to symbolize Ottoman military might and discipline. But they are also a product of a system called the devshirme, a levy of Christian boys from the Balkans who are taken, converted to Islam, and trained in the arts of war and governance. Raised in the imperial palace or barracks, these boys become fiercely loyal to the Sultan, cut off from tribal or family ties. To modern ears, this system may sound unsettling, and indeed, it was controversial even in its own time. Yet it also served as a form of upward mobility. Many devshirme youths rose to become powerful generals, governors, and even grand viziers, the empire's highest administrative officers. The Janissaries themselves become an elite force, disciplined, uniformed, and armed with the latest military technology of the era. As Orhan expands his dominion, his forces move into the Balkans. In 1354, an earthquake damages the walls of Gallipoli, a key fortress on the European side of the Dardanelles Strait. The Ottomans seize it swiftly, establishing their first permanent foothold in Europe. It is a quiet but momentous shift. The empire now straddles 2 continents. Let us walk for a moment through the markets of Edirne, formerly known as Adrianople. Ottoman forces capture this important Byzantine city in 1361, and it becomes the new capital. Here, the city buzzes with change. Turkish officials administer taxes, Greek artisans continue their trades, and mosques begin to rise alongside churches. The Ottomans, unlike many conquering powers, often allow a degree of religious and cultural autonomy. This pragmatism fosters stability. Orhan is succeeded by his son Murad I, who rules from 1362 to 1389. Under Murad, the Ottoman realm expands rapidly in the Balkans. Modern-day Bulgaria, Serbia, and Macedonia fall under his sway. But this expansion also brings the empire into conflict with powerful European kingdoms. The Battle of Kosovo, fought in 1389, is one of the most legendary encounters of this era. On the plains of Kosovo, Ottoman forces clash with a coalition of Serbian, Bosnian, and Albanian warriors. The fighting is fierce and bloody. Murad I is killed possibly by a Serbian assassin after the battle, yet the Ottomans emerge victorious, and his son Bayezid I, known as the Thunderbolt, immediately takes the reins. Bayezid is a dynamic and ambitious ruler. He campaigns across the Balkans and Anatolia, tightening Ottoman control. He also lays siege to Constantinople, the fabled capital of the Byzantine Empire. Though the city holds out, it is increasingly isolated, surrounded by rising Ottoman power. But just as the Ottomans appear unstoppable, a thunderclap breaks from the east. In 1402, Bayezid faces a formidable new challenger. Timur, also known as Tamerlane, a Central Asian warlord who has carved out a brutal empire across Persia and beyond. At the Battle of Ankara, the Ottoman and Timurid forces collide. Bayezid is defeated and captured, reportedly confined in a gilded cage. He dies soon after, and the empire spirals into what historians call the Ottoman interregnum, a period of civil war between Bayezid's sons. For over a decade, the once unified empire fragments. Brothers fight brothers, cities shift allegiance, enemies grow bolder. It is a time of uncertainty, and yet the Ottoman state does not collapse. This resilience is one of its defining features. Eventually, Mehmed I, one of Bayezid's sons, emerges victorious. He reunifies the empire, restores order, and re-establishes Edirne as the capital. His son, Murad II, continues this work, and even briefly abdicates the throne to his own son, a young boy named Mehmed, before returning to power during a military crisis. It is Mehmed, however, who will soon change the course of history. Let us now enter the city of Constantinople in the early 15th century. Once the heart of the Roman and Byzantine world, it now clings to faded grandeur. Its famous walls, mighty and tall, have protected it for centuries, but inside, the city is quiet. The population has dwindled. The empire has shrunk to little more than the city itself. It is a ghost of a once great civilization. In 1451, Mehmed II, only 19 years old, ascends the throne. Young, brilliant, and ambitious, he sees Constantinople not just as a city, but as a symbol. To conquer it would be to claim the legacy of Rome, to unite East and West under a new Islamic empire. Over the next 2 years, Mehmed prepares meticulously. He commissions a massive fortress, Rumeli Hizara, on the Bosporus Strait to control naval traffic. He assembles a vast army, perhaps over 80,000 strong. He builds an enormous cannon so large it takes dozens of oxen to move, capable of hurling massive stone balls at the city's walls. In April 1453, the siege begins. Let us pause here and imagine the sounds: the rumble of artillery, the cries of soldiers, the clash of steel against stone, but also the silence of prayer, the anxiety of citizens behind the walls, the tension that hangs heavy in the spring air. For 53 days, the Ottomans batter the city. Finally, on May 29th, 1453, they breach the walls. Mehmed rides through the city, not in blind triumph, but with solemnity. He orders the Hagia Sophia, the great Byzantine cathedral, to be converted into a mosque, preserving its beauty and structure. He protects the city's Christian population, allowing the patriarch to remain as spiritual leader. Mehmed is now known as Mehmed the Conqueror, Fatih Sultan Mehmed. He makes Constantinople the new capital of the empire, renaming it Istanbul in time. He envisions it as a cosmopolitan capital, a city of mosques and palaces, markets and gardens, scholars and artists, a bridge between worlds. As we reflect at the close of this chapter, we see an empire transformed. What began as a small frontier principality has become a true imperial power. The Ottomans now rule from the Balkans to eastern Anatolia, from the Black Sea to the Aegean. Their armies are feared, their cities flourish, their courts attract poets, architects, and theologians. But beyond the conquests and battles lies something quieter, a vision, a dream of unity across cultures, of civilization built not just on the sword, but on law, architecture, and learning. The Ottomans are no longer just warriors. They are empire builders. Now, as your thoughts grow soft and your breathing slows, picture the great domes of Istanbul rising into the dusk. Lanterns flicker along quiet streets. The sound of the call to prayer echoes across the Bosphorus. And in the heart of the city, a young sultan dreams of a world reborn. Let yourself drift, for our journey is only just beginning. We open this chapter under the long shadow of conquest. The year is 1453, and the city of Constantinople, now Istanbul, begins its transformation under Mehmed the Conqueror. The young sultan, only 21 at the time of his victory, is not merely a warrior, he is a scholar, a strategist, and a builder of civilization. Istanbul pulses with new life. Artisans and architects arrive from across the Islamic world and from recently conquered Christian lands. Markets hum with voices speaking Turkish, Greek, Armenian, Arabic, Persian, and Ladino, the language of Sephardic Jews, who will soon find refuge in Ottoman lands after their expulsion from Spain. Mehmed reestablishes Istanbul as the beating heart of the empire. He commissions palaces like the great Topkapi Palace, a sprawling complex overlooking the Bosphorus. It is more than a royal residence, it is an administrative nerve center and a symbol of Ottoman authority. Within its ornate courtyards and tiled chambers, eunuchs and scribes, scholars and viziers manage the expanding empire. He also creates the Imperial Council, or Divan, which meets daily under the dome of the council chamber. Here, grand viziers discuss military campaigns, legal matters, and taxation. The Sultan listens in secret from behind a grilled window, unseen yet all-seeing. Mehmed brings scholars from Iran and Egypt to establish a legal and religious foundation for his rule. He commissions a set of imperial laws, Kanun, to supplement Sharia law. Kanun regulates land, taxes, and criminal justice, and becomes a crucial mechanism of Ottoman governance. He also invests heavily in cultural revival. Poets, historians, and calligraphers find generous patronage. Persian remains the language of high literature, Arabic the language of theology, and Turkish, enriched by both, evolves into the sophisticated court language of the Ottomans. When Mehmed dies in 1481, he leaves an empire stretching across 3 continents. His tomb, nestled within the Fatih Mosque complex, becomes a place of quiet pilgrimage. He is succeeded by his son Bayezid II, who emphasizes consolidation over conquest. He faces internal rebellions and the rising threat of European naval powers. Yet, it is during his reign that the Ottomans welcome thousands of Sephardic Jews, fleeing persecution in Spain. These communities enrich Ottoman urban life with their knowledge of trade, finance, and printing. Bayezid's reign gives way to a more tumultuous succession. After a power struggle between his sons, Selim I, known as Selim the Grim, ascends the throne in 1512. Selim is a stark contrast to his predecessors. Stern, austere, and decisive, he expands the empire rapidly and brutally. In just 8 years, he reshapes the Islamic world. Let us follow Selim eastward, where the powerful Safavid Empire of Persia promotes a different branch of Islam Shi'ism, in contrast to the Sunni orthodoxy of the Ottomans. At the Battle of Chaldiran in 1514, Selim defeats the Safavids decisively. incorporating eastern Anatolia into Ottoman control. But it is the campaign to the south that marks his most profound legacy. In 1517, Selim conquers Cairo, the capital of the Mamluk Sultanate. With it, he gains control of the holy cities of Mecca and Medina, as well as Jerusalem and much of Syria and Egypt. The last Abbasid caliph in Cairo, a symbolic religious figurehead, is taken to Istanbul. From this point on, the Ottoman sultans are not only emperors, but caliphs, spiritual leaders of the Sunni Muslim world. Selim returns with ancient relics of the Prophet Muhammad, including his cloak and sword, displayed with reverence in Topkapi Palace to this day. By the time Selim dies in 1520, the empire spans from the Danube to the Nile, from Algiers to Baghdad. But it is his son, Suleiman, who brings the Ottoman world to its zenith. We now enter the age of Suleiman the Magnificent, known in the Islamic world as Kanuni Suleiman the lawgiver. Imagine the empire under Suleiman as a vast and elegant mosaic. Each province from the Albanian highlands to the deserts of Arabia is connected by a network of roads, caravanserais, postal stations, and administrative districts. Governors called beys and pashas rule in the name of the Sultan, while taxes flow steadily into the imperial treasury. Suleiman is both warrior and philosopher. He leads 13 major campaigns, pushing deep into Europe. In 1526, at the Battle of Mohacs, Ottoman forces annihilate the Hungarian army. Much of Hungary falls under Ottoman control. In 1529, he lays siege to Vienna, though the city holds firm. Still, the Ottomans are now the dominant power in southeastern Europe. Suleiman's navy, led by the legendary Barbarossa Hayreddin Pasha, rules the Mediterranean. Ottoman fleets confront Spanish and Portuguese forces, protect Muslim pilgrims on the Hajj, and link Istanbul to faraway lands like Tunisia and Yemen. But Suleiman's greatness lies not only in conquest. He reforms the legal code, streamlining the complex Kanun laws and unifying legal practices across the empire. He strengthens property rights, regulates land tenure, and introduces protections for peasants and artisans. Let us now step into Süleymaniye Mosque, the crown jewel of Istanbul's skyline. Designed by the master architect Mimar Sinan, it rises in harmony with the city's hills and the gentle curve of the Bosphorus. Within, light pours through stained glass windows. Calligraphic verses encircle the dome. The scent of incense and the murmur of prayers fill the air. Sinan, once a military engineer, becomes the chief architect of the empire. His buildings, from mosques and bridges to aqueducts and schools, become a signature of Ottoman civilization. Functional, yet majestic, his works blend aesthetics with geometry, faith with form. Suleiman's court is also a place of poetry and learning. The Sultan himself writes verses under the pen name Muhibbi, exploring themes of love, duty, and divine beauty. Scholars debate law and astronomy. Miniature painters illustrate epic histories. The Ottoman world is vibrant, multi-ethnic, and multilingual, a realm where Christians, Jews, and Muslims live side by side, often within the same neighborhoods. Yet this era also has its shadows. Suleiman's reign is marked by court intrigue and power struggles, especially within the harem, the private quarters of the palace where the Sultan's family and concubines reside. One of the most remarkable figures of the period is Hurrem Sultan, also known as Roxolana, a former slave who becomes Suleiman's legal wife and a powerful political advisor. Hurrem's rise marks a shift in Ottoman palace dynamics. Her influence, along with the power wielded by later women of the harem, leads historians to speak of the Sultanate of Women, a period where royal women play significant roles in diplomacy, charity, and even succession. Suleiman's own succession is troubled. His beloved son Mustafa is executed amid suspicions of treason, likely fueled by harem politics. His later years are marked by grief and isolation. When he dies in 1566, at the siege of Szigetvar in Hungary, he is buried beneath the Süleymaniye Mosque, his empire at its widest reach. As we reflect in the soft quiet of this moment, let us pause. We have seen an empire born from frontier raids become a global power. We have heard the clash of swords and the chant of Sufi poets. We have walked among marble domes and sat beneath calligraphy tracing the names of God. And we have witnessed Suleiman the lawgiver and the poet weaving law, faith, and empire into one enduring tapestry. Let your mind now drift with the breeze that moves across the Golden Horn. The bells of ships ring gently in the harbor. Lanterns sway outside the shops of Galata. In a quiet corner of the palace, an old scribe closes his book for the night, and in that stillness, the legacy of the classical age settles like silk across the sleeping city. As the sun sets on the classical age of the Ottomans, we enter a more uncertain dawn. The empire is vast, magnificent, yet the signs of strain are becoming visible, like fine cracks in the marble tiles of an old palace. We begin in the aftermath of Suleiman's death in 1566. His son Selim II, nicknamed Selim the Sought by later chroniclers, is more interested in wine and leisure than in statecraft or battle. The reins of power gradually shift into the hands of grand viziers, military commanders, and increasingly women of the imperial harem. The empire still thrives outwardly, trade flourishes, architectural patronage continues, yet beneath this surface, deeper tensions begin to stir. Let us first look at the shifting military reality. In 1571, a critical moment arrives. At the Battle of Lepanto, off the coast of Greece, a coalition of European powers under the banner of the Holy League inflicts a crushing naval defeat on the Ottomans. Though the empire rebuilds its fleet within a year, Lepanto marks the end of unchecked Ottoman dominance at sea. Still, land campaigns continue. Sokolu Mehmed Pasha, the capable Grand Vizier, holds the empire together with efficient governance and bold diplomacy. But after his assassination in 1579, the central administration begins to erode. Now drift with me to the empire's heart, Anatolia, where cracks begin to widen. In the late 1500s and early 1600s, waves of rebellions break out, known collectively as the Salali revolts. These are not noble insurrections, but desperate uprisings by rural bandits, displaced peasants, and disillusioned soldiers. The causes are many. Climate change brings droughts and famine. Currency devaluation upends local economies. Soldiers returning from long campaigns find no land or compensation. Displaced and hungry, they turn to banditry. Entire provinces fall into chaos. The state responds with repression, but also with reforms. A new class of military governors, derabes or valley lords, rise to power in the provinces. Though nominally loyal to Istanbul, they often act with independence, collecting their own taxes and ruling with local authority. A slow decentralization begins. Meanwhile, the very nature of war is changing. Across Europe, gunpowder warfare is evolving rapidly. The Janissaries, once the elite infantry of the empire, begin to lose their edge. They resist reform, grow increasingly politicized, and by the 1600s, gain influence in palace intrigues. Some even marry, start businesses, and pass their titles to their sons, a far cry from their original identity as elite slave soldiers. The harem, too, grows in influence. The long reign of Sultan Murad IV, 1623 to 1640, is shaped as much by his own iron will as by the behind-the-scenes power of his mother, Kosum Sultan. Known for her intelligence and political acumen, she rules as regent for her young sons and even survives palace coups until she is eventually assassinated in a brutal power struggle. Still, through this turbulence, the empire endures. Let us pause now in the cool shadows of Istanbul's coffee houses, which have begun to flourish. Here, scholars and poets, artisans and janissaries sip dark, bitter coffee and engage in lively debates. Though banned at times by religious authorities, these places become hubs of public opinion, literacy, and informal politics. We move next to the mid-1600s, where a sense of fragile order returns under Köprülü Mehmed Pasha, a powerful Grand Vizier appointed in 1656. He and his son, Fazıl Ahmed Pasha, initiate reforms to restore discipline in the army, stabilize finances, and reassert imperial authority. Under their leadership, the Ottomans achieve military victories in Crete, Transylvania, and against Venice. The Köprülü era, though brief, restores some of the empire's prestige and stability. Yet this is not a return to Suleiman's golden age, it is more a pause in the decline. In the latter part of the 17th century, tensions once again rise, especially along the empire's European frontier. The Ottomans seek to expand into Central Europe once more, and in 1683 they lay siege to Vienna for a second time. The Sultan is Mehmed IV, but real power lies with the Grand Vizier, Kara Mustafa Pasha. Imagine the Great Siege. 150,000 Ottoman troops encircling the city, camps stretching for miles. For months they bombard the walls, but the defenders hold, and then a massive relief army, led by the Polish king John Sobieski, arrives. The siege collapses. Kara Mustafa Pasha is executed for his failure, and Vienna becomes not just a military defeat, but a symbolic turning point. The empire's frontier in Europe begins to contract. This defeat sparks the formation of a powerful European alliance, the Holy League, which drives the Ottomans back over the next 15 years. One by one, cities like Buda, Belgrade, and much of Hungary are retaken. The war ends in 1699 with the Treaty of Karlowitz, a watershed moment. For the first time, the Ottomans formally cede major territory to European powers. The loss stings. Yet more than land, what is lost is a sense of inevitability. The empire is no longer seen as invincible. The myth has faded, but even in defeat, the Ottomans endure. Let us take comfort now in the resilience of daily life, in the rhythm of morning prayers echoing through minarets, in the markets of Damascus, Cairo, and Baghdad, still bustling with spice, silk, and stories. In the mosques, scholars still teach. In the villages, harvests still come. This is not the collapse of a civilization, it is its transformation. And as we settle into the quiet hours of reflection, we notice a shift in the Ottoman soul. The empire begins to look inward. It questions, contemplates. Why did the old methods fail? What must be done to survive in a changing world? This introspection will shape the next century. Reformers will rise. New ideas will circulate. The Ottomans will begin to adapt slowly, haltingly, to the age of print, science, and commerce. As we close this chapter, allow your mind to drift over the empire's vast and varied landscapes, from the snowy peaks of Bosnia to the warm gardens of Aleppo, from the olive groves of Anatolia to the marshes of the Tigris. The empire, though wounded, still breathes. Its heart still beats in the domes of its cities, in the songs of its people, in the ink of its scholars, and in the dreams of those who believe renewal is still possible. Let us rest here for a moment at the quiet edge of transformation. As we drift gently into the 1700s, the Ottoman Empire is no longer the aggressive conqueror of the past, nor yet the sick man of Europe that later commentators would describe. It is a world unto itself, wounded perhaps, but alive with rhythms of change, revival, and negotiation with modernity. The Treaty of Karlowitz, 1699, marks a turning point. After centuries of expansion, the empire has entered a new phase, one of preservation and adaptation. Rather than conquest, the goal now becomes stability, to hold what remains, to reform what is worn, and to survive in a world rapidly transforming around it. Let us begin in Istanbul, where the sultans rule not as warrior kings, but as guardians of tradition. It is here, amid the tulip gardens and marble courtyards of Topkapi Palace, that we meet Ahmed III, a ruler whose era will come to be known as the Tulip Era. The Tulip era, or Lale Devri, stretches from roughly 1718 to 1730. It is a time of peace, urban renewal, and cultural flowering. The tulip, beloved for its symmetry and elegance, becomes a symbol of refinement and transience. Gardens are planted, pavilions are built, poetry is composed in praise of delicate blooms. But beneath the surface lies something more significant. For the first time, the Ottomans begin to engage directly with Western Europe, not just as foes, but as sources of knowledge. Diplomatic missions are sent to Paris and Vienna. Ottomans observe clocks, printing presses, libraries, and salons. They return with new ideas about governance, science, and even fashion. In 1727, with the blessing of court officials, Ibrahim Mutafarrika, a Hungarian convert to Islam, opens the first official Ottoman printing press. It is limited at first mostly religiously neutral texts, but the shift is real. A new age of written knowledge slowly begins to take root. At the same time, the court initiates reforms in architecture and engineering. European-style fountains and pleasure pavilions begin to appear along the Bosphorus. The old world is meeting the new cautiously, selectively. But this peaceful bloom does not last. In 1730, a dramatic rebellion erupts, led by Patrona Halil, a former janissary. Angry at the extravagance of the elite and the influence of foreigners, he rallies disaffected troops and commoners in the streets of Istanbul. The Sultan is forced to abdicate. Many court officials are executed. The Tulip era ends abruptly, yet the spirit of reform is not extinguished. Under Mahmud I and later sultans, efforts continue to modernize the military. The Humbaracha Corps, a unit of bombardiers, is reorganized under the direction of Comte de Bonneval, a French exile who converts to Islam and becomes Humbarachi Ahmed Pasha. He introduces Western artillery techniques, builds barracks, and trains troops in the European style. But the resistance is fierce. The Janissaries, increasingly entrenched and corrupt, resist all attempts at reform. They see innovation as a threat to their privileges. Efforts at change are often sabotaged from within. Now, let us look eastward to the growing threat of Persia, under the brilliant but erratic Nader Shah. In a series of campaigns in the 1730s, he challenges Ottoman control in Mesopotamia and the Caucasus. Though no lasting conquests result, the pressure underscores how exposed the empire's borders have become. To the north, too, a new power is rising: Russia. Under Peter the Great and his successors, Russia begins to push southward, eyeing the Black Sea and the Balkans. In multiple wars, particularly in 1768 to 1774, the Russians defeat the Ottomans and force the signing of the Treaty of Küçük-Kaynarca. This treaty is a watershed. For the first time, a foreign power, Russia, is granted the right to intervene on behalf of Orthodox Christians within the empire. It also gives Russia access to the Black Sea and the right to navigate through the Bosporus. The empire's sovereignty is now punctured by outside powers. Despite this, Ottoman society does not collapse. Rather, it adjusts. A series of sultans, Mustafa III, Abdulhamid I, Selim III, each in their own way, attempt to strengthen the state. Let us pause now in the year 1789. Across the Mediterranean, in France, revolution is breaking out. Monarchs are overthrown. New ideas, liberty, equality, citizenship, are in the air. Though these concepts are still distant from Ottoman minds, their tremors are felt. At this moment, a thoughtful and ambitious sultan ascends the throne, Selim III. Selim is a reformer. He recognizes that the empire must change or perish. He studies the European armies. He invites foreign experts. He sends envoys abroad. And in 1797, he launches his boldest initiative, the Nizam-e-Jadid, or New Order. The New Order Army is a modern fighting force trained in Western drill, dressed in new uniforms, and paid from a restructured treasury. Selim also reorganizes the tax system, supports new schools, and encourages the arts. But change, once again, provokes backlash. The Janissaries see the new order as an existential threat. Religious conservatives oppose the Sultan's openness to foreign ideas. In 1707, a violent revolt erupts. Selim is imprisoned and later killed. The next year, a new figure rises, Mahmud II, a survivor of the palace intrigues and a reformer in waiting. But his story belongs to the next chapter. Let us now turn our gaze to daily life in the 18th century empire, a tapestry of change and continuity. In the city of Aleppo, caravanserais still host merchants from across Asia. In Sarajevo, mosques and churches stand side by side. In Istanbul, the call to prayer echoes through Baroque-style mosques, newly influenced by European architecture. In Anatolian villages, the rhythms of harvest and prayer continue much as they had for centuries. Ottoman women in urban centers begin to read more, participate in literary circles, and manage waqfs, charitable endowments. Artisan guilds regulate trade, train apprentices, and maintain the standards of their crafts. And amid all this, the wars, the reforms, the resistance, the people continue to live. They marry, mourn, celebrate, and sleep beneath stars that have watched over this land since the time of Byzantium and before. As we settle into quiet reflection, we recognize a truth. The Ottoman Empire is not frozen in decline. It is wrestling with modernity. It is being reshaped slowly, painfully by pressures from within and without. It is not a story of collapse. It is a story of transformation under strain of a civilization attempting to adapt its soul to the age of machines, maps, and ideas. And so, as the 18th century draws to a close, and new currents of revolution and empire sweep across the globe, the Ottomans remain bruised, but enduring. A twilight empire with one more century of struggle and renewal ahead. Let your mind now drift gently over the winding alleys of Damascus, the calm shores of Izmir, the mountain paths of Albania. Hear the soft rustle of silk, the prayer of a traveler, the creak of a ship's timber, all carrying the echoes of an empire still searching for its future. As the 19th century unfolds, the Ottoman Empire stands at a crossroads between past and future, tradition and reform, sovereignty and subjugation. The centuries-old dynasty is still alive, still ruling from the imperial heights of Istanbul, but the world around it has changed irrevocably. We begin with Mahmud II, who takes the throne in 1808. He is a cautious reformer, wise to the lessons of his cousin Selim III's fate. For years, Mahmud consolidates power quietly. Then, in a bold move in 1826, he eliminates the Janissaries, the once elite corps now seen as corrupt and ungovernable in a dramatic purge known as the Auspicious Incident. The barracks are shelled. Thousands are killed or exiled. The Janissary institution is abolished. In its place, Mahmud builds a modern army trained on European models, a foundation for further reforms to come. This act symbolizes a new era, one of centralization, modernization, and at times, desperation. With its institutions decaying and foreign powers circling, the empire launches the Tanzimat, or reorganization, period in 1839, a sweeping effort to restructure Ottoman governance. The Tanzimat reforms, initiated under Sultan Abdülmecid I, seek to reshape the empire into a modern state. A new legal code is introduced, inspired by European civil law. Non-Muslims are granted equal rights under the law. New schools and universities are built. The military and bureaucracy are reorganized. Railways, telegraphs, and postal services expand across Anatolia and beyond. It is a brave effort, and yet a deeply fragile one. Behind the facade of modernization, the empire is facing growing unrest. Nationalist movements stir in the Balkans, where Greeks, Serbs, Bulgarians, and others begin to demand autonomy or independence. In 1830, Greece wins its freedom, backed by Britain, France, and Russia. More independence movements follow. Foreign debts mount. In 1875, the Ottoman state defaults on its loans. European creditors respond by establishing the Ottoman Public Debt Administration, which takes control of customs, taxes, and other revenues. In effect, the empire becomes partially managed by foreign powers. The empire's internal contradictions deepen under Abdulhamid II, who ascends in 1876. At first, he promises a new constitution and parliament. But within 2 years, fearing revolt and instability, he dissolves the assembly and rules as an autocrat. Yet even Abdulhamid cannot stop the tide of history. As we drift through the final decades of the 19th century, the empire is beset on all sides. Russia continues its march in the Caucasus and the Balkans. Austria-Hungary occupies Bosnia-Herzegovina. Britain takes control of Egypt and the Suez Canal, the empire's economic lifeline. Still, the empire clings to its core: Anatolia, Syria, Iraq, and the Arabian Peninsula, though even these regions are increasingly restive. Meanwhile, in Istanbul, life continues in layers. Modern cafes line the boulevards, gas lamps light the streets, steamships glide up the Bosphorus, students attend medical schools and law academies, women publish poetry and manage charities. The empire is not merely decaying, it is evolving, unevenly, with glimmers of vibrancy amid decline. Then, in 1908, a sudden spark, the Young Turk Revolution. A group of reformist officers and intellectuals united under the Committee of Union and Progress CUP force Abdulhamid to restore the constitution. Parliament reconvenes. Political parties form. For a brief moment, it seems the empire might reinvent itself as a constitutional monarchy. But new challenges arise. The Balkan Wars of 1912 to 1913 deliver a devastating blow. The empire loses almost all of its European territory. Macedonia, Albania, Kosovo, and much of Thrace slip away. Millions of Muslims flee into Anatolia as refugees. The dream of a multi-ethnic empire frays further. And then, in 1914, the world descends into global conflict. The First World War begins, and the Ottomans, persuaded by the CUP leadership, ally themselves with Germany and Austria-Hungary. It is a fateful decision. The war brings devastation. In the Caucasus, Ottoman troops battle Russian forces in brutal winters. In Mesopotamia, British troops advance northward. In Palestine and Syria, Ottoman armies are pushed back. And in 1915, one of the darkest episodes in Ottoman history unfolds: the Armenian Genocide. Fearing collaboration with the Russians, the Ottoman government orders the deportation and massacre of Armenian civilians. Hundreds of thousands perish a wound that remains open to this day, its memory whispered through generations. By 1918, the empire is broken. The Ottomans surrender. Allied forces occupy Istanbul. The once mighty empire is carved up by the victors. France takes Syria and Lebanon. Britain claims Iraq, Palestine, and Transjordan. The Sultan, now little more than a figurehead, watches helplessly from the palace windows. But in the heartland of Anatolia, a new fire kindles. A young general, Mustafa Kemal, later known as Ataturk, rejects the terms of surrender. He organizes resistance in Anatolia. Between 1919 and 1922, he leads the Turkish War of Independence, defeating foreign armies and abolishing the puppet government in Istanbul. In 1922, the Ottoman Sultanate is formally abolished. Sultan Mehmed VI, the last of the dynasty, flees into exile on a British warship. 2 years later, in 1924, the caliphate, the symbolic leadership of the Muslim world, is also dissolved. After more than 6 centuries, the Ottoman Empire is no more. But its legacy lives on. You can still see it in the silhouettes of Istanbul, in the domes of the Suleymaniye, the arches of the Grand Bazaar, the calligraphy of forgotten poets etched in stone. You can taste it in the spices of Damascus, hear it in the lullabies of Sarajevo. walk through it in the courtyards of Cairo and Baghdad. The Ottoman Empire, for all its contradictions, was not just a political structure. It was a civilization complex, enduring, and deeply human. It governed with laws, upheld pluralism in its prime, and cultivated music, architecture, poetry, and science. It stood at the crossroads of continents and centuries, and it shaped the lives of millions in ways that still ripple through time. As you now rest, breathing gently, let the memory of the Ottoman world surround you. Picture a minaret at twilight, a caravan at dusk, a scribe bending over his inkpot, a grandmother telling stories of sultans and saints. Let the centuries drift past like clouds, no longer battles and borders, but moments of beauty, struggle, and resilience. The Ottomans have passed into history, but their echo lingers in stone, in story, and in the quiet night. Sleep well, traveler. The journey is complete.